Hi everyone, my name is Molly Paul and I did my project on water quality biomonitoring in the Gorgas swamp. So this is actually a really interesting ecosystem to me because it's fresh water while still being on Barrier Island. So it's really unique and it's actually right next to residential zones. I was really curious about, the dynamics of this. Is it healthy? Is it supporting a great diversity of life? So I just wanted to generally figure out, is it healthy or not? And I decided, in my own mind, it's probably not because it has really poor water quality. But how do you actually go about measuring the water quality? So there's different animals that can indicate whether or not an environment is healthy or not. They're called indicator species. So, for example, frogs. They have really permeable skin, and toxins get in. If there's less frogs, it's not healthy. You can do the same thing with macroinvertebrates, which is what I did. That's a fancy word for bugs. Macro meaning small, but you can still see them. Invertebrates don't have a spine. So bugs are icky, macroinvertebrates are cool. So basically to sample, I just got to play in the dirt. I went around and using a transect line, I scooped up mud with a shovel, put it in a bucket, rinsed it out, and saw what I got. And so I used, a sieve, hand nets, shovel. It got good and dirty. So here are some pictures of what it looked like, just to give you a sense. There's, on the left is a YSI, it's what's used to measure salinity and dissolved oxygen, temperature. And then in the middle is a transect line, and on the right is scooping mud into buckets. So here are some examples of organisms you would expect to find in this kind of ecosystem. You can see there's some larvae on the left, there's some snails, bivalves, really good diversity. This is what I actually found. So there were some dragonfly nymphs, aquatic worms, riffle beetles, and water penny beetles. For all of our visual learners, a lot more aquatic worms than anything else here. And all of the species individually are categorized by whether or not they tolerate pollution well. So on the left are species that are more sensitive to pollutants, and on the right are species that can handle higher degrees of toxins and pollutants in the water. So clearly it's pretty not good water. Here are some physical parameters that I found. There was a lot of tree cover. It's called a swamp because it has more woody vegetation than grassy. So there's tons of trees and pretty, obviously, low salinity, low dissolved oxygen, and relatively shallow. I could walk in all of it. And then this is where it got kind of weird. So these are things I just personally noticed as I was going around. So obviously the water quality is terrible because there's hardly any macroinvertebrates. But when you look around, I was catching frogs. It's a frog. It's cool. Let's go look at it. So there's some different frogs that I found. There were tons of mosquito fish in the water. So really, I did see a diversity of animals outside of macroinvertebrates. So that kind of contradicted the data that I collected. But on the other hand, there was really, really high turbidity, which makes it hard for plants to grow. And it was right next to residential zones. So any runoff from all of those houses could possibly pollute this water. And this is why you should care. This is why I care, at least. So first of all, macroinvertebrates are an indicator species. I mentioned that if they're not doing well, the ecosystem's not doing well. There's also a ton of invertebrates in the world in general, so it's really important to study these animals. And honestly, it really matters that we make sure that our ecosystems are healthy. So many of our waterways are interconnected, and we rely so heavily on them for resources. So this is not like, the data says it's a really unhealthy ecosystem. This isn't like apocalyptic. The water quality is poor. That happens sometimes. And so overall, it is poor water quality, but other things such as the plant life and the frogs that I found indicate that it can sustain a variety of organisms. And if I was to do this again or explore other things, I'd look at maybe plant life or other indicator species in that area, see how maybe other waterways connected have been affected by these pollutants. I'd like to thank teachers, counselors, interns, students, Dauphin Island, and organizations back at home that helped me, my school, St. Mary's School, and the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Are there any questions I can answer? Yes. Okay, so she asked, where is the swamp? What's the water, coming in like? So it's actually, it's only like a 6 mile long island. So it's right down the road. It's heavily wooded. It's right next to a residential zone, and the water's really stagnant. It's not running at all. It's part of why the turbidity is so high is because, it's just kind of sitting there. And it's all, I think most of it's probably coming from, rain coming down and running into it because it is a really low area on the island. Any other questions? Yeah? Greg? Do I think if I took some more samples, I would find something else? I actually do not. I took a lot of samples. We were out there for a good long while, sampling in the water column, sampling along the bank, sampling muck under the water. So there was actually a really good variety of organisms that I was trying to find. I sampled just flat out dirt on the land, really stretching to see where these might be to make sure that it wasn't just an odd transect line. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah. I found a bronze frog. What species of frog did I find? I found 2 bronze frogs, and I caught them. One actually was missing a leg, which is kind of weird, but it was really neat to catch. It's fun. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.